was sitting on his pappy's knees. He saw that hammer laying down on the ground. Hammer be the death of me. Oh, that hammer be the death of me. Hi everybody, I'm David Donar. I'm a folk artist, a storyteller, an animator, a cartoonist, and I'd like to share with you today folk tales and folk tunes and some of the differences in the origins of it. I want to thank the Markham Arts Council. Thank you for having me here and to share some of this wonderful music with you. And so hopefully you guys will get a deeper understanding. That intro was John Henry. You might know it. It's a kind of a popular folk tune. And we'll get into some of the origins of what it's all about. So with that in mind, just to share a little bit of vocabulary, folk tunes are simply kind of based on folk tales. And folk tales are basically ideas or stories that are handed down verbally through tradition, through cultural ideas. So it can be national, it can be global, it can be ethnic. There's also legends. A legend is something that is written down, like a legend of Paul Bunyan or the legend of John Henry. A myth is kind of the same thing like a legend. A myth is a story told as if it was true, but it becomes grand. It becomes supernatural. People tend to exaggerate. And that's the beauty of these music ensembles. They're traditional music, but then they change, they evolve. And so people change the meaning or the characters behind it. So folk tales to me are great because they have rascals, villains, heroes, stories about the railroads, which I love about my singing and my storytellings. I like those type of stories, especially if they have a rascal and a hero on a railroad. That's one of my favorites. So let's get started in John Henry. John Henry is based kind of on a true story of a railroad worker who would drive spikes into the mountain, and they would blow up the mountain to create the tunnels. And so there was a man documented based in West Virginia who possibly was a prison labor worker, African-American worker. So it's got some interesting political, social applications to it and the ethics of using prison labor. So John Henry, again, it's about a man who comes from the prison labor and ultimately sacrifices himself for the best of humankind. It's kind of a supernatural, superhero thing. John Henry was a baby. He was sitting on his pappy's knees. He saw that hammer laying down on the ground. Oh, that hammer be the death of me. Oh, that hammer be the death of me. John Henry said to Captain, oh, man ain't nothing but a man. You can take that hammer, you can pound me down. I'll die with that hammer in my hand. I'll die with that hammer in my hand. The captain said to John Henry, oh, I'll bring my hammer down. I'll bring my steam hammer, I will pound that steel. I'll pound that steel right in the ground. I'll pound that steel right in the ground. John Henry had a baby, went by the name of Polly Ann. When he came down with that fever, oh Lord, she swung that hammer like a man. Oh, she swung that hammer like a man. When they buried John Henry, they buried him in the sand. When Can that locomotive come rolling down? There lies a steel driving man. There lies a steel driving man. Anyway, so that's John Henry with the banjo. This is kind of a traditional old-time banjo, and if you hear, that's called claw hammer, and it's kind of an old traditional stroke, and it originates from the early African Americans who came to the New World and played the banjo on a gourd. But it's a kind of a similar technique, and it's kind of got a rolling. It's got a good beat to it. It feels like a train rolling or a hammer striking. And so I think it was adequate for that type of song. So John Henry was a popular tune. A lot of people adapted and changed it to their preferences and to their interpretation. And so I'd like to share with you another version. It's actually a new song, or a completely different song, but it's totally based on John Henry. And it's done by the great Mississippi John Hurt. He was a great old-time country blues player. And he took a lot of these songs and adapted and made it his own. And so this one's called Spike Driver Blues. And it would be if some of his fellow rail workers saw what happened and decided, I'm not taking this anymore, I'm going to leave. And that's unfortunate. A lot of these workers that worked these rails that spiked nails into the hard rock, the silicon dust would get in their lungs, and a lot of them would die. Maybe not right away, but eventually. Or the exhaustion or the dynamite. It was perilous. It was really dangerous. So the mortality rate was pretty bad for immigrants and people that were disadvantaged. And a lot of the African American men ended up in these situations. But the songs are reflected of it. And this one I really think it's a great interpretation of John Henry. So we'll do Spike Driver Blues. John Henry was a steel driving man. Yeah, he went down. Oh Lord, he went down. Oh Lord, he went down. You can take my hammer, tell him I'm gone. Tell him I'm gone. Won't you tell him I'm gone? Won't you tell him I'm gone? This hammer was laying on the road, on the side of that road, on the side of the road, on the side of the road. That hammer was all covered in red, covered in red, all covered in red, all covered in red. That hammer, you can throw it into that river. You can hear it sing. Lord, hear it sing. You can hear it sing. This hammer was made of silver, but it rings in gold. The Lord rings in gold. It rings in gold. Take that hammer, give it to my captain. Tell him I'm gone. Lord, tell him I'm gone. Won't you tell him I'm gone? That hammer, it killed John Henry. Lord, it won't kill me. Lord, it won't kill me. Lord, it won't kill. So yeah, you can hear that. And that's a great just driving beat that a lot of these country blues players were influenced by the train and by that rhythm. And I think that's what makes songs about railroads, and again, these legends, really make it incredibly fun to play. All right, so let me get my harp out. And I'm going to sing a song about a railroad hero. He was an engineer called Casey Jones. And Casey Jones was a famous man for saving a lot of people's lives. He was a real live person back in the early 20th century. He was based in Mississippi. Get that set up. And he rode the Illinois Central, the IC. What he did was he was on a rail line coming into Vaughn, Mississippi, and around the bend, there was actually another train on the track, the same line. So what you have is you had a lot of collisions. A lot of things would always happen. Fiascos, disasters, train wrecks. And people wrote songs about it. It was almost like before social media, there was a huge event, a huge disaster, they would then make songs about it. Well, this one particular instance, he was the engineer, and he stayed in the engine and put the brakes on. It did stop it completely. It did crash, but he saved all the passengers on his train. Unfortunately, the engine blew up, and he died as a result. A lot of times, engineers and brakemen would jump off, and they'd save themselves. He could have done that, but he stayed in there, held the brake, and he unfortunately perished, but saved a lot of people. So Casey Jones was a famous legend, and the stories are, this one generally tends to be true. So this is Casey Jones. This is done by the great Mississippi John Hurt. Oh, Casey Jones was a good engineer. Said to the fireman, got nothing to fear. All we need is some water and some coal. Gonna look out that window, watch the steel wheels roll. Just Tuesday morning, looked like rain. Round the corner came a passenger train. Sitting in the cabin was good old Casey Jones. He was a good engineer, but he's dead and gone. Well, mommy, she heard the news, sitting on the bed, lacing up her shoes. Said to her children, get on your hat, go downtown and see where your pappy is at. Mommy, oh, how could it be? Daddy, he died on that IC. You don't worry and never you fret. You gonna get that pension. Your pappy is dead. Oh, Casey Jones, he said before he died, gotta fix them roads so all the people can ride. When they ride the ride. Put their trust in hands in God. Gonna put their trust in the hands in. Casey Jones, yes, the IC, Illinois Central. Of course, you know you made a great legend when the Grateful Dead sing a version of you. Always important. So I say, if you want more insight to a lot of the backstory and information, I don't want to burden with you a lot of this, but go to my site, daviddonar.com. You will find all these definitions, illustrations, and a lot of other information. And it's a way for you to interact with me. You can write me a note or a message. I always appreciate it. I love the harp or the harmonica because it's, again, a folky thing. It was people could travel with it. It complements a lot of different things, and it's kind of has that interesting rail sound to it. All right, I'm going to do another song about railroad travel. If I get this thing back on me, laugh back and forth with these instruments. So this is about a hobo called Bill Jones. So I think when you hear some of the lyrics, like riding the rod, put the hands in God, it's like, what does that mean? Well, a lot of those terms were used in different songs, but in railroad terminology, a hobo was someone who would ride the rails and sometimes most likely wouldn't pay for the ride. So they would get on and they'd go underneath the carriage, and you would ride literally the undercarriage of a car. Super dangerous. A lot of people would die riding that way. But hobos were generally transitory workers. They would work fields and then, again, live on the fringes of town. A tramp is someone who doesn't work, who just gets on a train or travels. And a bum is someone who just stays in one place and doesn't work. So there you go. The more you know, right? So this is Old Bill Jones. Was written based on Charlie Poole. Charlie Poole wrote a song called Milwaukee Blues. He was an old country blues artist in the mountains of western North Carolina, and where I spent some time and got influenced by some of these really wonderful art and music. And so he took a lot of Casey Jones, he reinterpreted it, and created this interesting song about a hobo. So I'll do a song. My version's called Detroit Blues, but it's basically kind of the same version of his. So let's give it a shot. It's Tuesday morning and it looked like rain. Round the corner came passing train. On the blind said Old Bill Jones, he's a good old boy, wants to get home. Wants to get home. Wants to get home. He's a good hobo, wants to get home. In Georgia, on the tramp, roads get muddy, lakes getting damp. Hop the freight train out of this town, don't let hobos hanging around. Hanging around, hanging around. Don't let hobos hanging around. In Atlanta for the day, brakeman said I had to pay. Had no money up on my shoes, headed up north, I got the Detroit blues. Detroit blues, Detroit blues. I'm headed up north, I got the Detroit blues. Old Bill Jones said he died. Gotta fix them roads the folks can ride. When they ride, they ride, they ride. Put their trust in the hands in God. Hands in God. hands in God. When they ride, they put their hands in God. Old Bill Jones said before he died, 2 more roads that he'd love to ride. Great man said, could it be Southern Pacific and Santa Fe? The Santa Fe. It's Southern Pacific and Santa Fe. Oh boy, there you go. Boy, that's all that picking. That's really hard to do. That's something I'm still trying to learn. Normally, you hear the banjo, and you hear that they play it nice and fast. Nice and fast. That's what they do. But I think it's just a beautiful folk instrument, and done right, it sounds really authentic. So anyways, let's stay on the railroad journey, and we talk about rascals, right? Rascals, villains. And he wasn't really a villain, but he was a kind of an outlaw. And kind of folk people like when the average common person could buck the system, right? The system was always out to get the average person. They could never quite get ahead because the rich, powerful people would always game the system. But when one person would cheat it or run around and evade authority, there were folk songs written about these people. And they tended to make really good characters. And then, of course, with each generation of songwriters or people would sensationalize it, make it even more grandiose. So this is based on a real person called Railroad Bill. And Railroad Bill, again, has been sung and written about in so many different genres. Bob Dylan wrote it, did a version of it. And I'm going to share some of the animation that I did based on my song. And again, if you go to daviddonar.com, you'll see some of the animations that I've have up there in their entirety, and you can get a little bit more whimsical look at it. But I'll splice it in some of my performing here so you can get a sense of it. But he was a real live person. Not everything he did in the song's true, but he got away with a lot of interesting things. This will be a medley too. I'm going to actually... The song chord structure is similar to Freight Train, and Freight Train by Elizabeth Cotten, who was a great country blues singer in North Carolina as well, African-American woman who was a great legend in her own right. So I'm going to do a little kind of melody or a medley of both because they both have similar phrasing to it. All right, so this is Railroad Bill. He never worked and he never will. Railroad Bill, he never worked, man, that dude, he never will, 'cause he rides. Railroad Bill, he said he will. He's smoking cigars with $100 bills, yes, he rides. Railroad Bill, he's a mean man. He shot the lights from that poor brakeman's hand. Yeah, he riding Railroad Bill. Freight train, going too fast. Freight train, way too fast. When they ride the ride, put their trust in the hands in God. If I die before I wake, I pray for my soul that they'll take. Bear me down on Sullivan Street, I'll smile at every girl we meet. Freight train, headed out west, with that 44 tucked right in my vest. When I go, I'll drink my rye. Say hello, then we say goodbye. Railroad Bill, Railroad Bill. He never worked, man, that dude, he never will. But he rides. Railroad Bill. Railroad Bill, never worked, never will. Okay, that's our villain. We're going to do another villain. Chilling like a villain. With another banjo tune, why not? Actually, I don't need this for now. Pardon me. Take that off. Now with banjo, you usually got a tune. Please forgive me. I'm not always good at tuning by ear, but that's what you do when you play a banjo. Now villains or rascals, I always like to talk about that. And this one's based on a real person called Stagger Lee. Stagger Lee was a person who lived in St. Louis. A lot of good songs come from St. Louis. I don't know if there's crazy people or villains that tend to become really good song topics. Stagger Lee kind of was a gangster, a drug lord, a ringpin, and in the underbelly of St. Louis. So you had some interesting events that would happen. And so there was a situation that Billy the Lion and Stagger Lee got caught in an altercation, and it claimed that it was a Stetson hat that set it all off. Again, it's kind of like this person who was notorious but yet became more famous in the end. He killed a man. And in this story, he dies in the end. He's actually killed by the state. But in the real life, he actually doesn't die. He ends up in prison and dies of something else, of like syphilis or something, for God forbid. But this is the legend or the myth of Stagger Lee. Police officer, how could it be? You can arrest everybody, not old cool Stagger Lee. He's a bad man, that cool old Stagger Lee. Mr. Billy the Lion begged Stagger Lee, please spare my life. I got two little baby girls and a sweet darling love in white. He's a bad man, that cool old Stagger Lee. I don't care about your babies or your loving wife. You took my Stetson hat, now you're gonna lose your life. I'm a bad man, I'm cool old Stagger Lee. Down went Billy the Lion, down upon that floor. He's a bad man, that cool old Stagger Lee. Ladies and gents of the jury, what do you think of that? Billy the Lion lost his life over that Stetson hat. What a bad man, that cool old Stagger Lee. Well, Stagger Lee sit on the gallows and he started to curse. Well, judge said, get him now, before he gets us first. He's a bad man, cool old Stagger Lee. Well, the town folk gathered around with their hands up high. They all gave a great big cheer, glad to see him die. He's a bad man, that cool old Stagger Lee. Police officer, how could it be? You can't arrest everybody, not old cool Stagger Lee. He's a bad man, that cool old Stagger Lee. He's a bad man, that cool old Stagger Lee. Stagger Lee. And I'd like to finish it off with another great murder ballad. This was called Betty and Dupree. And Betty and Dupree were a couple in Georgia, down in Atlanta. Frank Dupree was 17 years old, just barely able to function in society. And he fell in love with this cabaret singer in the 20s. And so you could say maybe he became so enamored or so infatuated with her that he would compel himself to do something as crazy as rob a jewelry store. And unfortunately, bad things happen when you rob a store with a gun. And some would argue that he probably was stunted, behaviorally, mentally, probably wouldn't fit trial for a murder. Unfortunately, he did hang. And so this became sensationalized and it became headline news. And newspapers love to sensationalize the crime spree in Atlanta. But again, with these ballads, they become immortal in song. I'll send it off with Betty and Dupree. Betty and Dupree, Mama wants a diamond ring. Yeah, Betty and Dupree, Betty wants a diamond ring. Well, Dupree said to Betty, I'll get you almost anything. Went to Atlanta, rob a jewelry store. He went down to Atlanta, got his old 44. Went down to Peach Street, he was gonna rob that jewelry store. In came a store detective, Dupree shot him down to the floor. In came that store detective, Dupree shot him to the floor. Yeah, when he fell down, Frank Dupree said, I would do 3 or more. Ran up to Detroit, oh, the police hot on his tail. Ran up to Detroit, police hot on his tail. Well, he called Betty, Mama, post my bail. Oh, they took him back to Atlanta, gonna hang him way up high. Going back to Atlanta, gonna hang him way up high. He goes up that elevator, Betty, you better wave him goodbye. Betty, Betty, see what your greed has done. Betty, oh Betty, see what your greed has done. The only man you ever loved, gonna be dead and gone.